Today marks my 10-year anniversary creating content on YouTube. And as such, I've decided to do a little bit of a celebration over on twitch.tv/Totalxclipse, but also today do a factory world tour of my current playthrough, which as it stands is currently 460 hours worth of content, which we started when 1.0 was released. And should you wish, I'm going to make this save available to everyone, although I will just give a word of caution. Whilst working on this facility here, which you can see is pretty large as it stands currently and it's still not finished, we managed to break the Unreal Engine object limit. As such, I'm going to have to up the objects available in the game by editing the config file, but it does mean that if you check out this save, now that it's made available, and you start building in it, there is a good chance that it's going to crash. So just be aware of that. And also, as it is a world tour, we are going to look at some of the builds that you may not have seen yet because the Let's Play episodes haven't been released yet, such as this diluted fuel plant, the iron smeltery, and we'll briefly look at my current project, which is the iron facility. So if you're not interested in having the Let's Play spoiled for yourself in advance, then I will put in some timestamps in the video so that you can skip those sections should you wish. Anyway, with that out the way, let's start at the beginning. And it all started with our first starter factory in the grassy fields. I made sure to save up for some coupons to get the decorational pieces so that from the get-go we could start to play around with the overall design. And though this isn't one of my best builds, I will say that for a starter factory, this has some pretty cool elements to it, like this walkway through the facility. The facility itself only produces the very early resources. So we're talking iron plates, screws, rods, as well as a selection of copper items and quartz. And I'm actually really happy with the overall build. And I particularly like being able to see the resources running along the bouts to the storage facility, which came a little later on, as well as having all of the walkways above the factory floor. It also had basic storage, which got us started with dimensional depots, and on the upper floors, we produced reinforced iron plates, modular frames, and rotors. Unfortunately, I didn't set up any awesome sinks here, which is why these lines have backed up. The facility itself isn't used that much anymore, with the exception of the train stations. These still bring the resources in from other factories and then send those resources through the facility and across to our storage facility. One of the areas that I love and hate about this though is the train station entrance. Unfortunately, we had such a lot to squeeze in such a small space that it meant that we had a bit of spaghetti on the lower floors, but I love the highway that we've done through this using our first train blueprint, and I'm particularly happy with the power augmenter just overlooking this section. On the whole, it's a great little start, but it does require a fair bit of TLC and going over just with a perfectionist's paintbrush just to clean up all of this, because it's quite a fast and nasty job. We wanted to move on and progress with the world. Speaking of taking resources via train to storage, the first big train that we have was a push-pull one taking the steel from this facility to that very station. This facility is one of the smaller ones that's a bit more industrial looking on the inside. And you can see how we played around with the shape whilst keeping the same materials that we used in the other facility in the grassy fields to try and make them in keeping with the theme that we had with the copper and the concrete. One of the things that I most love about this facility is actually the miners that are inside and how we have blocked them off. We have a little viewing area here, and I think this works really well and something that I'd love to play around with more in our builds. One of the main things that I wanted to do with this facility was to have the vast majority of resources being transported above us, which is why most of the buses are set in these frames above the walkway, allowing us freedom to walk around the facility, but we have once again got a walkway above. With this, we started playing around with the orange lighting. So if you take a look underneath, you can see that we've used the orange lighting for the Smeltery section, and then we've also played around with the light blue lighting that we had earlier for the actual production line. As it stands, this facility is producing the steel beams, steel pipes, and also the encased industrial beams that we need for our facility, though we'll be looking at expanding this in the future with other locations. There was a storage area here, but given that we're now transporting everything to the storage facility, this is null and void. We do not use this anymore. One facility that has been untouched for the whole duration of the playthrough has been this one here. This was our very first Caterium line. In fact, I think it's our only Caterium line. And it is used exclusively for the production of AI limiters and quick-wire. On the whole, it's a pretty small facility, but it does the job that it needs to. More importantly, this facility and also our iron motor facility, which we'll head to now, both shared the same theme, all using the same materials and color to make them all blend well together. This is one of the darker builds, and we've tried to just use the lighting and having slits in the roof to let in a little bit of natural light as well to light this up. And I'm pretty happy with the overall aesthetic. We've also got on the other side some more lighting. We played around with this lit fence design, which I'm really happy about. But the big thing about this facility was that it was our first time using the iron pipe alternate recipe, which meant that we were able to produce these steel pipes out of just iron, and from there we were able to produce these motors all from iron. Now, before we head across to the storage facility where all of these resources are heading to, I think we should cover the power station that we used to power all of this. As it stands, the blue crater is being prepped to produce over 500 gigawatts of rocket fuel. However, before all of this began, we were extracting all of the sulfur in the blue crater, as well as the coal here, to produce compacted coal. And I was really happy with how this facility came along, even though it does look a little bit sparse now looking at it. This facility replaced the old coal power plant that we had prior to it and produces 750 compacted coal per minute. And I'm particularly happy with the compact design that we have going here, even if sorting out the logistics for this particular build was an absolute nightmare. I mean, really, trying to sort this out was aggravating to say the least. Regardless, we managed to produce our compacted coal, and that is being sent all the way downstairs to our coal facility, producing a whopping 7.8 gigawatts, which was a lot at the point of the game that we were at. And I had more than a few problems just trying to transport the water to the facility. We spent a long time trying to get everything working, and we had a lot of pipe bugs to figure out at the time. In order to save us from having to use pumps everywhere, we made sure that at the start of the build, we pumped the water as high as possible so that all the water would run down into the facility. And yes, we could have used a water tower technique. It's just, I prefer not to use them. I just don't like it. I prefer to run the pumps, even if it does use up power and take a lot more time. When it came to the design of this facility, I was really happy. We spent a lot of time working with the Tier 2 blueprint designer, which would allow us to create blueprints that we could replicate. So each one of these contains 4 coal generators, allowing us to easily replicate this across 100 odd gens. I do like the way that this turned out, though it is quite cramped up here, and it feels kind of a bit of a loss having all the lighting underneath given that we're always on the walkway, but I am very happy with the overall design regardless. My favorite thing though is probably going to be the little maintenance shaft that we have all the way down the center. It's just a nice little touch, if you ask me. Now we will come back to this build in a little bit, but before we do so, let's head over to the oil facility. And I should mention, all of the blueprints that you see us use throughout this video are available on my Patreon page if you're interested in getting them for free, or alternatively, there are plenty of Let's Play videos where we actually break down how to build these in the video. Now we have some absolutely huge plans for our oil facility here, which we've placed on Paradise Island. Unfortunately, Paradise Island doesn't have any resource nodes on it, which does mean that we are sending the oil using a push-pull system and 3 trains from the Golden Coast. So for those of you who are wondering why we have 4 lines here, that's because 2 are for the main line, which is where you can see this train coming along at the end now, and then the other 2 is part of the push-pull system. So we have 1 line going towards the Paradise Island and 1 coming from it so they don't collide. And we all know train crashes are bad. The plan is to make this facility much bigger over the course of this Let's Play. At the moment, we're just producing the computers and circuit boards in this central hub area, or the Colosseum as I like to call it, with any excess fuel that's being produced being burnt off, which is why we have a lot of fluctuating in our grid. One of my favorite parts of this build would have to be the train station section, where we have the trains coming in and pushing out after dropping off their resources. I really like the overall design, and I would love to play around with this more at a later date as we build this up further. But it isn't the only train station section that we have here. We have 3. So this middle one, and we're actually going to see the train pulling out in a moment, is a push-pull line, but we've had to give it a secondary station, which is this red one in front of us, so that we can make sure that the freight trains actually unload and reload in the right position. Hence why it's going to pull in and then pull out here. Had I put a bit more thought into it, I would have probably not sent these back to the starter facility storage. I would have added another train station for them to send to, because it does just look a little bit weird compared to the rest of the build. And the other station is this section here. This brings in the iron, but also the heavy modular frames that we need, which we'll talk about shortly for this section. Along with the oil production facility, we also have the modular engines being produced here. Unfortunately, I haven't connected these to an awesome sync because I didn't think we'd leave it running, and as such it has eventually saturated up. But this was one of my favorite builds in terms of lighting and how open everything is. However, I will admit we did come into an issue with the overall shape of the build, which has caused these Z fighting moments throughout. Funnily enough, at the start of this playthrough, I did say I wasn't going to do any silly shapes that were difficult to build around, because that would make my life hell. Yet I still managed to do exactly that. This facility, which is slightly north of the rest of the island, is also producing space elevator parts. This is creating the adaptive control units. It's another very simple line with just everything being run along the bottom floor and then the produced items up to the second floor where they're combined in the manufacturer. And one thing that I definitely feel we can work on for future builds in this area is just the walkability of it all. There are no walkways outside of the facilities themselves, which makes it really difficult if you don't have a jetpack or hoverpack to get around. Moving on, we have the storage facility, or my central storage facility, which many people say is not needed, but it is. And I'll talk about why shortly, as it's necessary to know what's going on with the other facilities. So we have our little hub here. I actually just placed this on top. I haven't done any real decorating. I just wanted to make sure that if we died, we were near to this facility. This is all a blueprint once again as well. You can see how we've put this all together. And this is where I'm hoping all of our resources will flood through. We have a nice little... Thinking about it, I should have flipped these around. I swear I did for other parts of the build. Did I not? You know what? I'm tempted to say this was one of the bugs in 1.0 that's flipped this around, because I always have them on show. Yeah, it's empty. It's on the back. It's flipped. That wasn't supposed to happen. Oh, it's going to be a pain to redo these, I think. I wish I'd never seen that. I'll just not save this. But here we have all of the resources coming in. Some resources are just placeholders for the time being. As you can see by the iron, this means that we've got plenty of space to expand. Same on this side as well. But with this, we have our own little dimensional depot area underneath, meaning that any excess resources will be sent to here first and be ready to be buffered into the dimensional depot. And on top of that, we have our own little central storage station. If you are interested in how I've built this particular facility, do check out the Let's Play series. There's a whole video on it, and I think we've done another one breaking down the whole facility as well, separate to the Let's Play. But I will put this as part of the Let's Play playlist so that you can have a look through them as well. On the other side here, we do have the whole system. So the idea here is that we have resources flowing into storage and then overflowing to the awesome sink. And then this particular line is designed so that if we have any spare resources, we can just stick it in there and they will be fed back into the facility if we're just trying to get rid of whatever's on us. And of course, like I mentioned, any excess resources is sent to the awesome sink area up here. Now, the idea with all of these builds was to try and make it clean and a bit sci-fi-esque, hence the lighting that you see me use for pretty much all my builds. But as these builds get bigger and bigger in the Let's Play series, we're starting to get to that point now. We're going to look at doing more of a brutalist architectural style, followed by using elements that we've picked up along the way to kind of blend the theme of all our builds together. Before we move on, I did want to very quickly show off the conveyor bus line. So we have, entering the storage, we have two layers at the moment. We have the top layer, which is from all the resources in the train stations over there. And these head to our logistics line underneath the storage. And then we also have a lower section which is brought up to the logistics line as well. That's taking the resources from our starter facility here. And the logistics floor isn't anything special. It is just a floor dedicated to all of the conveyors, and they just filter into their dedicated line or go around to the other side of the build where the other half is, so that the storage containers receive the items that they need. As we move away from the storage facility, I do just want to mention some of my favorite parts, such as the little train station here that merges back onto the line. I love trying to play with the flow of the lines and using curves, as you can see in my builds, and this is one that I think I've done particularly well. But it's certainly not the only one by any means. Now, with this playthrough, I'm trying to send as many of the resources via train as possible. It's my favorite way for doing logistics in the game, and though I've had to make a little adjustment as to how I use the trains, and we'll talk about that shortly, briefly, I have been using them throughout the build. So you'll see a lot of focus on little stations here and there, just bringing in those resources. And I'll be honest, it's just fun going around the build on the train anyway. There are some really nice areas, such as this little cliff here as we go to the sulfur area. And other worthy areas to go through via train is our little Santa's grotto inside the cliff here. We didn't get to build this as big as we wanted to, but I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. and this future train line, which is in its humble beginnings at the moment. In the Rocky Desert, we have two facilities to talk about here. The first one of which is the heavy modular frame factory. What I love about this is we built a roundabout for the trains outside, bordering the whole facility, and then we have the facility on the inside. I had actually planned to run trucks inside this facility, pick up the resources and then head out, but I decided against it in the end. And what made this facility so special was the fact that for this, we were only using iron. There's no coal producing these heavy modular frames, and so we had to make use of alt recipes in order to get that. This was also one of the first facilities that we really started to concentrate on the overall look of the build, so I'm really happy with the lighting and the shape, despite saying I wouldn't mess around with silly shapes. But we have multiple levels, including the smelting at the back here, then our very early base resources on the lower levels, and then our secondary resources producing things like the encased industrial beams in the center. A lot of the overall build just came down to experimentation, and I'm really pleased with how this all turned out in the end. But this is nothing compared to what we did further along. The next build, the aluminum factory, or is it aluminium, was a real trial by fire. I wanted for us to have the ability for trains to run through, and this is something that we will allow in future builds as well. Ooh, I need to add another pillar there. But I love this concept of seeing trains along multiple levels, as well as seeing them running within the facility. And that is probably in part where I came up with this idea for the double highway, which we'll talk about shortly. The entrance to this build is probably one of the more outposty looking ones. I have no other word for it, with the fencing all around the outside. And it's something that I would like to play around with future builds as well, to make them feel like they're almost like military complexes that are being defended from in this strange alien planet. One of the priorities with this build, other than to be able to see trains pass through it from time to time, was the walkability. I wanted to have walkways all the way through and plenty of lighting. This meant that any of the conveyors holding items would be brought above or below the floor, or if it was on a lower floor, such as the scrap aluminum, there would be a little fence around it to stop you entering that area. I was also starting to get sick of the refinery design, so I started playing around with different ways that we could light them or clip items into them to make them look a little bit different, which you can see here with the coated foundation underneath and then the sign above, just breaking up those refineries. The train line that flows through the facility is bringing bauxite. This is from the bauxite node at the top of the cliffs, just overlooking the northern Rocky Desert. Northern Rocky Desert? Rocky Desert? We'll get there eventually. And the lower station brings in the coal from the top northwest coast. As we make our way through the facility, we have the train station for the coal just to the left of us here. And we also have our aluminum ingot production just across from the train that goes through. This actually works really well because what we're doing here is we're sending all of our aluminum ingots across to this section, which is producing the aluminium alclad sheets. And then if we have one of these priority powers, I don't have one of those, so let's just jump up. If we go up to here, we can turn this off. And what this then does is turn off the production along here. So all of the aluminum ingots that we're producing below are then sent, instead of in this direction, it's sent across to here, where it goes to our aluminium frames. So this serves two purposes. So we could do with a little bit more lighting in this section, but we really played around with the design and access to different areas, which I was really happy about. And this kind of represents the start of our new building style. We're going to have a much bigger focus on designs moving forwards, which brings us over to our next build, which brings us back to the blue crater. This is our diluted fuel facility, where we're using all the crude oil that's available here and combining it with water once it's been produced into heavy oil residue, which is done in this section here, to be turned into the diluted blend fuel alternate recipe. The facility itself is part of a 3-part series, or maybe a 4th one if we do a tour of it once it's fully done, where we produce the diluted fuel, the turbo fuel, which is in this blocked out area here, and then the rocket fuel. Now in this facility we have the blenders working away across 2 floors in this section here, and I really like the light coming down and making those pipes pop. But that's not the only spot that's running here. So if we go across all the way over to here, we have our coke refineries and our heavy oil residue refineries. So this here is producing the petroleum coke, and this is using one of our many blueprints, which is what made this much easier to build. And then if we head down here, thought I had a walkway down. Anyway, if we head down here, we have a passageway to the... Oh, that was odd. We have a passageway from the blenders in this section over here, all the way across to the coke. So we went on the floor above, but don't worry, there are elevators across. The heavy oil residue refineries are in this section here, and we could do with a walkway coming up to this area. But if we go across, you can see the overall design, and I'm really happy with what we've done here. I love the light flooding in. I love the refineries with their streaks of light either side, and then also the pipes, which are above a lower walkway as well. And we've also played around with adding signage as well. So we have the caution there. We go up to the next floor, where you can see we've got the exit either in that direction or this direction. But what I've really enjoyed about this is playing around with the design, adding the signs to make it easier for people to walk around, and blending all of this together. It's the start of our first big facility, and the first of hopefully many, but this is producing about 50 gigawatts of fuel that we use to power our facility. One of the best things, in my opinion, is what we've done with the blenders here. So we've used various lighting techniques to really highlight various sections, as you can see here, to make it so that our buildables don't just look all the same all the time. If you really want to, we've got a way to get up onto this little section, and we've got a little observation post up here. In our effort now to make this facility walkable throughout, we do have a walkway that goes all the way across to the train station. This is what's going to be bringing in the sulfur and the coal, as well as the nitrogen that we need in order to run the turbo fuel and rocket fuel facility. And we've already started decorating this, but this is actually for a future episode much further down the line, because we need to get the next build that you'll see shortly running first and foremost. So we have train logistics in this way, and then we will have our turbo fuel plant in this direction. So still just very much a hollow shell for the time being, but you can see how it's going to be developed. Now the majority of this build is, or at least all the factory lines are built using blueprints, and we came across a big issue. Now I have almost fully upgraded my dimensional depots. We could still do with the stack increase. In fact, this is something we really need, but I haven't found any Mercer spheres for the time being. But also the upgrade, the upload speed. And what I found with these massive blueprints, now if you look at the blueprint here, you can see that for the iron plates, that's a good example, and also the quartz, we're using over 4 stacks of iron plates for this blueprint and 7 stacks of quartz. This is partly because it also includes the roof as well. And because we're building these bigger blueprints, and this is only a Mark II variant, we find that we're running out of resources really quickly, even if we have the dimensional depots full. And as such, I need the central storage to grab resources to place them into here so that we can then place a couple of the blueprints down using take from the depot first, and then just topping up with whatever resources we have in here. Otherwise, we have to wait ages for them to refill. Another thing that we had to do in regards to that in order to increase the amount of blueprints that we were able to place was set up dimensional arrays. And these can be found here. The first one is our concrete array. Now we went a little bit overboard because we've got 16 dimensional depots dedicated to that, which is allowing us to do almost 2,000 items uploaded per minute. But that's really useful when I'm going through a lot of stacks. It's not needed so much anymore because we're going for more niche builds, but certainly when we were expanding that was important. And the other one is this here, which is the iron facility. This is actually a pretty poor excuse for an array because it's only got, well, 3 iron plate depots. But it does mean that we're able to get about 500 resources uploaded per minute, which is really useful. Given we have a couple more dimensional depots spread across the world for them. And before I forget, all of the fuel that we produce is sent along the pipe bus, which you can see opposite us, where it runs across the water pipes for the compacted coal plant and ends up in our fuel generator facility. Now, this doesn't look like much, but when each of these are overclocked to 250%, you can see we're actually producing quite a bit of power, with us running at about 60 gigawatts in total at the moment. And that will hopefully be enough for us to finish the next build that we're working on and then start focusing on the turbo fuel facility afterwards. Now for the final facility, we need to talk about the logistics because I'm reworking the logistics in my world, which makes it look fantastic, in my opinion. So in short, we've been running out of space on our train lines, which has resulted in traffic jams occasionally occurring, specifically in the grassy fields. As such, I've reworked my trains for future builds, where we're using a 2-tier highway. Now the idea of this is that we have the raw resources, so our iron, our copper, or all of that along the lower section. This is actually going to be pulling resources from all across the map, similar to what we have done in the Dune Desert. One thing I'll mention about this area is I fell in love with the curved conveyors after I'd been playing around with the straight angled conveyors beforehand, which is why it's kind of got 2 different sides to it. And I think moving forwards, we'll be playing around with curved belts for any of the exterior facilities that are extracting resources, harvesting resources. And then inside the facilities, we'll be using the straight belts. But the important thing to note is that on the lower level, we'll have all of our iron ore, copper ore being sent to our smelteries. And then on the upper floor, we will have resources being sent between the factories. This is where the smeltery comes in, which is this facility here. Now, as it stands, this is only dedicated to iron and can produce a maximum, if we have everything running at its max potential, at about 23,000 iron ingots per minute. Quite a lot. You can see along the bottom section the trains dropping off the iron. 2 stations are dedicated to iron. There's 2 currently to copper and then 2 to Caterium for the time being. But I've yet to do the copper or Caterium section of this build. So once these trains drop off their iron ore, they will be sent up along these buses to, quite frankly, a ton of refineries producing pure iron ingots. Each one of these is overclocked to 250%. And all of the produced iron ingots make their way to our compressor section here, which I'll be talking about in a future video. But basically it compresses resources along to the lowest amount of lines possible, which is really important because it means that we can run these facilities prioritizing which section, which line, which resource we want to produce first, which is iron plates at the moment and iron rods. And this is going to produce all of the iron resources that we need at our other facilities. So maybe that's iron rods, iron plates, reinforced iron plates, modular frames. If we have excess resources, perhaps we'll do some steel pipes from the iron-only alt and see where we go from there. Maybe some motors as well. Now, I've just realized that a load of these rod constructors aren't running, and it's because their buffer is full, and I think I've screwed up, oh dear, by putting double the amount of constructors on a line because both of these merge together. So I'm going to have to fix this in a future episode before you actually see the episode. But if you're wandering around wondering why there are yellow lights, that will be the reason why. Oh dear, that is quite a big boo-boo. Oh, it's going to take me a while to fix. Anyway, the important thing is once all that's done, they are then compressed down again here to these two train stations, which will then take all of those iron plates and iron rods to their designated factories and run on a circuit, collecting all the resources they need and then dropping them off where appropriate, running along the top section of our highway. And further trains will be added to that for each of the resources that we need. But given that we want to do our copper here as well as our Caterium, this facility is going to become a lot bigger, and I'm really excited to see how this develops. So if you're interested in that, do check out the Let's Play series, and over the coming weeks we'll be adding more episodes to that. That's different from the guided playthrough, which we're also doing at the same time. And if you want to check out this save, then do check the link. I will put the link to the Patreon page where you can access it for free. You don't even need to be a member. It's just an easy place for me to put all of my links, so you'll be able to download it there. But guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, hit the thumbs up and let me know if you'd like to see us do this again, maybe when we hit 1,000 hours in the game. But thank you so much for your support over the last 10 years and enabling me to do what I love for a living. And of course, if you would like to join us for the 10-year anniversary livestream celebration over on twitch.tv/Totalxclipse, I'll be there probably playing Satisfactory if you've decided to join immediately after this video, but we'll be going later into the night doing the factory cart Lego block build, as well as doing some other things. I hope to see you there. Special thanks, as always, goes to all of our incredible supporters on Patreon, most notably our Lunar Eclipse patrons, Firefless, The Calamity, Ben, Star, and Seeker Color, as well as our Blood Moon of the day, which today is Papa Snoozy. Until next time, as always, ciao for now.